Consider for a moment just the profound fragility of our modern digital memories.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we take thousands of photographs, right? We send millions of text messages, record countless hours of video, and it's all just sort of stored in this invisible, sterile cloud.
Yeah, totally out of sight.
Right, and we operate under this illusion that we are, the most documented generation in human history.
Which is kind of ironic, really.
It is, because when the server degrades or when the password is lost or the format becomes obsolete, entire lifetimes of digital interaction just vanish without a sound.
It's digital rot. That's what it is.
Exactly, digital rot. Now compare that ephemeral cloud to, say, a piece of faded paper just tucked inside a hardcover book, sitting quietly on a shelf in some small Midwestern town. That single piece of paper, which might just be a grocery receipt or a pressed leaf, could realistically outlast a terabyte of data.
Because it occupies physical space.
Yeah. Yes. It carries the literal indentation of a human hand pressing a pen into its surface. It requires someone to physically throw it away to destroy it. And as we're about to see today, there are some people who just absolutely refuse to be careless with the physical artifacts of the past.
Yeah, that's such a great framing for today.
Welcome, listeners, back to the little station on Commercial Street. Picture it with us, if you will. We are sitting right here before these vintage microphones in our small studio.
It's a great space.
It really is. And if you listen closely, you might catch the sound of the church bells faintly sounding outside in the Atchison air, marking the hour, just like they've done for decades.
I think I just heard the train whistle, actually.
Yeah, drifting right up from the river. So we're settling in, getting comfortable, and preparing for a deep dive into the source material that has just completely captured our imaginations.
The atmosphere of the studio, with the Midwestern light filtering through the glass, it really provides the perfect environment for this kind of unhurried, deliberate conversation. And that transition you just made, from the sterility of the digital cloud to the tactile reality of paper, well, it perfectly frames our objective today.
I appreciate that. But before we step fully into today's text, let's briefly rewind to where Chapter 2 left off. Because, the echoes of yesterday are definitely reverberating through the architecture of today.
Right, we have to set the stage.
So we concluded with that quietly profound sequence where the backyard gate was finally fixed by Patrick and young Tommy.
Yes.
And we observed Daniel, Tommy's father, sitting in his office, weighing the hard, cold financial costs of saving old things, wrestling with the reality that preserving history requires an actual budget, not just sentiment.
It takes resources.
Right. And we saw those mysterious orange survey flags fluttering in the yard of the old Whitcomb property, signaling that the machinery of unwanted change is encroaching on the neighborhood.
The developers' bulldozers are basically waiting in the wings.
Exactly. And finally, we witnessed that evening sequence where Tommy watched the porch lights of Atchison flicker on, one by one. It was this realization for a 10-year-old boy that separated a mere view of structural houses from a true home filled with living, breathing people.
It was a beautiful moment. And so Tuesday morning arrives, and we move into Book 1, Chapter 3, which is titled The Names Inside.
Such a great title.
It really is. And this marks a fundamental shift in the narrative because Chapter 2, well, it was heavily invested in the physical architecture of the town.
Yeah, the physical lumber and property line.
Exactly. We were looking at gates being repaired, houses being framed, the financial cost of upkeep. But this chapter shifts our focus entirely toward the spiritual architecture of memory.
Wow, the spiritual architecture.
Yeah, we're looking at books, written names, community ties, and these invisible, deeply woven threads that actually hold a civilization together.
And that brings us to the core mission for our deep dives today. We aren't going to simply ask, what happens in Chapter 3.
Right, that's just a book report.
Exactly. It's the equivalent of reading a table of contents. Instead, the central guiding questions we want you, the listener, to carry through this hour are these. What does this chapter reveal about the absolute mystery of family itself? And perhaps even more importantly, how do ordinary, seemingly mundane moments become the bedrock foundation of an entire civilization?
To answer that, I think we have to start with the mundane. The chapter opens by revisiting that repaired gate from the previous evening.
Right.
But the narrative pacing here is incredibly deliberate. It kind of forces the reader to downshift. The text notes that by Tuesday, the gate had ceased to be an achievement and become a gate again.
I love that line.
It's brilliant, it swings without scraping, it closes with quiet obedience. You know, in contemporary storytelling, when a character fixes something, we almost always expect a dramatic payoff.
Yeah, like it has to break later during a storm, or it keeps out a bad guy or something.
Right. But here, a thing truly fixed doesn't call any attention to itself. It just performs its quiet duty.
And see, I view that as a direct indictment of our modern look-at-me culture, where every minor accomplishment must be documented, uploaded, and validated by an audience.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, if you fix a gate today, you post a video of the broken gate, a time-lapse of the repair, and then, a triumphant selfie with the finished product.
Complete with a filter.
Right. But the Brennan family operates on a completely different moral philosophy. They fix the gate properly, so now it disappears into the background of everyday life. The perfection of the work is proved by its invisibility.
Which really reflects a philosophy of fidelity in small things. And I think this introduces a crucial connection to the writings of G.K. Chesterton.
Oh, let's get into it.
Yeah, he wrote extensively about the romance of ordinary life. Chesterton argued that modern society suffers from a sort of catastrophic failure of imagination. We tend to believe that romance and adventure only exist in the extraordinary,
Like scaling mountains or fighting wars.
Exactly, or achieving massive wealth. But Chesterton believed that the most extraordinary, miraculous things in the universe are the everyday repetitive duties performed with enduring love.
Fixing a gate so your family can walk through it safely is a heroic act.
It is, but it is a quiet heroism, one that actively rejects the need for a parade.
It's the heroism of endurance. And honestly, nobody embodies the romance of the ordinary more than Margaret Brennan in this chapter.
Oh, Margaret is fantastic here.
The scene transitions to the kitchen,
Right.
And Margaret is packing up lemonade and cookies for the library book sale. This initiates a really fascinating collision of worldviews between Margaret and her daughter, Claire.
Yeah, Claire is just the ultimate pragmatist.
She operates like a walking spreadsheet.
That is the perfect way to describe her.
She insists that Mrs. Bell, the librarian, already has refreshments provided. Claire points out, Mother, the library owns towels. It's completely illogical to bring duplicate supplies.
She sees the redundancy.
Right. But Margaret just completely refuses to stop, declaring that organized events are always one sandwich away from disaster.
I laughed out loud at that line. The contrast in characterization here is just brilliant. Claire represents the strict, almost courtroom-like utility. She evaluates actions purely based on their necessity and efficiency.
Yes.
Margaret, however, represents a deep, traditional Midwestern and Catholic family culture where food is never just a transfer of calories.
No, it's so much more than that.
Food is a tangible, physical expression of grace. You don't just provide food because someone is facing starvation. You provide food because the act of sharing it communicates, you matter, you are seen, and I am here for you.
I really want to push back heavily against the modern cult of efficiency here, though, because I think Claire's mindset is sort of the dominant religion of our time.
Oh, without a doubt, optimization is everything.
We are obsessed with it. We have apps to optimize our sleep, our diets, our workflows, our commutes. If Margaret optimized her morning, she wouldn't make the lemonade.
She'd save 30 minutes of labor.
Exactly. She would save the cost of the lemons and the sugar. She'd avoid the physical burden of carrying the heavy glass jars down to the library. But, if she optimizes her life, she strips the humanity entirely out of it.
That's the trade-off.
We forget the community is built almost exclusively on redundant, loving gestures. Efficiency makes us transactional, right? But surplus makes us relational.
Surplus makes us relational. That's a great point.
So think about it in your own life, to the listener. When was the last time you did something completely unnecessary, something entirely redundant, just for the sake of being kind?
And that tension between utility and affection is exactly what plays out when they actually arrive at the library.
Right, the lemonade battle continues.
Yes, because Claire, still operating on the logic of efficiency, immediately points out to Mrs. Bell that refreshments already existed. She wants the record to show that the lemonade is technically redundant.
She wants to be right.
But Mrs. Bell understands the underlying language Margaret is speaking. She tells Claire to inform Margaret that the jar will be returned, washed, dried, and more grateful than necessary.
More grateful than necessary. That phrasing is just magnificent.
It is the exact antidote to efficiency. Margaret's unnecessary gesture is met with unnecessary gratitude. This surplus of goodwill, this willingness to do more than the bare minimum required by a transaction well, That is the social glue that holds a civilization together.
Hmm.
Because if a society operates solely on the exact exchange of goods and services, it becomes sterile, and it eventually collapses under its own coldness. It requires the warmth of the unnecessary.
And that battle between cold optimization and warm humanity doesn't just happen in Margaret's kitchen. It is the exact same dynamic that governs how we organize human knowledge itself, which is what we encounter the moment they step into the Atchison Town Library.
The sensory transition in this scene is absolutely stunning.
They step out of the sweltering, oppressive, glaring Midwestern summer heat. The heavy door closes behind them, and instantly the atmosphere shifts.
It's cool. It is remarkably quiet.
And the text describes a faint smell of paper, dust, and something sweetly medicinal.
The sensory details there are working incredibly hard to establish the library as a secular cathedral.
A cathedral, yes.
Because in a small town, the library is one of the few remaining spaces that demands reverence without actually requiring a religious affiliation.
That's very true.
And fun fact, the chemical breakdown of lignin and cellulose in old paper actually produces volatile organic compounds that smell faintly of vanilla and almond.
Really?
Yeah. That's the sweet medicinal smell the narrator notes. So the transition from the blinding chaos of the sun-drenched street to the subdued, hushed light of the stacks, it signals a physical boundary between the profane, busy world and a sacred, preserved space.
And young Nora senses this boundary instantly. Her reaction is purely instinctual.
She stops right in her tracks.
She stops just inside the door and immediately drops her voice to a whisper, explaining to the others that the books don't want us to speak. She anthropomorphizes the entire environment.
Which is a classic cognitive mechanism in children. Developmental psychology shows that children often map empathy and intent onto inanimate objects because their brains are constantly trying to decipher social cues.
Right.
But from a literary perspective, children are often the most accurate barometers of a space's true nature. Nora feels the immense silent weight of the accumulated knowledge and stories pressing down on the room.
She knows she's not alone.
Exactly. She accurately perceives that the books are not just objects. They are a demanding presence. And this animism continues with the return of her walking stick, Moses.
Ah, yes, Moses the stick, who has successfully crossed the desert, which, in this context, was the 3-mile car ride in the stifling heat.
A perilous journey.
Truly. And now that they are in the library, Mrs. Bell gives Moses a 5-cent price sticker, which sort of validates his existence within the library's ecosystem.
It makes him official inventory.
Yeah, and Nora carefully positions him against a shelf where he can see. Now, Claire, ever the pragmatist, tells Nora, sticks do not require views.
Typical Claire.
But Nora completely ignores her because in Nora's worldview, a prophet obviously needs a vantage point.
It's hilarious, but the humor here really masks a profound philosophical point. To the adult pragmatic mind of Claire, the stick is dead wood.
Right, just a tripping hazard.
But to the child's mind, the stick possesses a dignity and a narrative arc. And this dynamic just amplifies when they begin helping to sort the books for the sale. This sorting process serves as a brilliant microcosm of how adults and children categorize the universe.
Claire is in her absolute element here. She wants rigid, unyielding categories. She creates strict piles for fiction, history, and religion. Everything must have a designated box.
Naturally.
Mrs. Bell, who has lived much longer and seen much more of human nature, has established tables labeled undecided and miscellaneous.
Which drives Claire crazy.
Claire is visibly appalled by this. She argues that is not a classification system. And Mrs. Bell counters with the brilliant observation that the miscellaneous table has survived 3 sales, just like Original Sin.
Which is such a Chestertonian quip, honestly. Mrs. Bell understands that lived reality constantly defies rigid categorization. Claire wants the comfort of absolute order. She wants to impose a grid over the chaos of human existence. But Mrs. Bell knows that human life, much like the books that attempt to capture it, routinely spills over the edges of our definitions. If we do not leave physical and conceptual room for the miscellaneous or the undecided, we are essentially denying the complexity of the human condition.
And the children take this rebellion against strict categorization even further. Nora abandons the tables entirely and creates her own category on the floor, which she names Animals Who May Be Important.
I love that so much.
She places a biography of Theodore Roosevelt in this pile simply because there is a bear on the cover.
Perfect logic.
Meanwhile, Grace, the teenager, decides to purchase a book entirely missing its cover. And when asked why, she explains that the book seemed embarrassed.
Grace projects human vulnerability onto a damaged physical object. She feels a genuine rush of empathy for a thing that has been stripped of its dignity.
Which brings us right back to Chesterton, doesn't it? The ability to see the world as enchanted.
Absolutely. Chesterton famously argued that wonder is hidden inside familiar things, and that adults suffer from a type of spiritual blindness brought on by repetition.
We get used to the miracles.
Yeah, we see the sun rise thousands of times, so we assume it is a mechanical, boring process, whereas a child sees it as a daily miracle.
Right.
In the library, an adult looks at a book missing a cover and sees damaged inventory that should be discarded or steeply discounted. But Grace looks at the same object and sees something naked, vulnerable, and in need of a home. She perceives that the inanimate object carries the residual weight of the humans who manufactured it, loved it, or discarded it.
I think we have to pause here and just ask ourselves how we categorize our own lives. Are we so obsessed with putting our experiences, our relationships, our neighbors into Claire's neat little demographic boxes that we completely miss the animals who may be important?
Do we leave any room for the undecided?
Right, because if you ruthlessly categorize your life for maximum efficiency, you actively eliminate the possibility of surprise. You eliminate the space where Grace operates.
Which perfectly transitions into the actual physical sorting the boys are doing. While Claire is off arguing about categories, Tommy is tasked with opening the older books to check for things left inside before they are sold.
Right, shaking them out.
Yes, and this is where the narrative shifts from the theory of memory to the physical reality of it.
Tommy begins unearthing the artifacts of ordinary lives. He finds a pressed fern. He finds a funeral holy card, a discarded candy wrapper,
Fern capsules.
and my absolute favorite detail, a grocery receipt so faded and worn that the only legible word remaining on the entire slip of paper is butter.
It is the accidental archaeology of a community. And to truly appreciate this, we must contrast it with how we record history today.
Oh, well, this is the crux of it.
Today, we intentionally curate our history. We write memoirs, we post heavily edited photos, we write blogs. We are constantly trying to control the narrative of how we will be remembered.
Like we're all our own PR agents.
Exactly. But these items Tommy is finding, the fern, the receipt, they were never meant to be historical documents. They were accidents of convenience. Someone needed a bookmark, reached into their pocket, and used a receipt.
The lack of intention is exactly what makes it so authentic. Like a curated Instagram profile tells you how a person wanted to be perceived. A faded grocery receipt used as a bookmark tells you how they actually lived.
It's indisputable evidence of life.
Yes. It proves that on a random Tuesday, decades ago, a human being walked into a store, purchased butter, went home, baked something, and sat down to read a book. The mundane act of buying butter is suddenly elevated to a structural pillar of this community's history.
And Mrs. Bell recognizes this. She instructs Tommy not to throw away the handwritten recipes he finds, noting that someone might buy the book just for the recipe.
She is teaching him reverence for the discarded fragments of daily life.
She really is. And all of this careful, reverent sorting inevitably leads them to the most significant discovery of the chapter, the Whitcomb box.
Ah, the Whitcomb box. Let's connect the threads here for the listener. In Chapter 2, the Whitcomb house with the property surrounded by those aggressive orange survey flags.
Right. Daniel was looking at it from his office.
Daniel was standing there, looking at this hollowed-out, empty structure, wondering if he could afford to save the physical framing of the house. The house itself had been stripped of its life, just waiting for a developer's bulldozer.
Very grim picture.
Very. But here, inside the cool quiet of the library, Tommy opens a cardboard donation box from that exact same estate. And what does he pull out? A worn, dark prayer book.
The physical description of this book is incredible.
It is. The gold lettering on the title has been rubbed completely off by years of human hands holding it. The ribbon marker is frayed almost entirely through, and inside the front cover, they find the names.
The contrast is devastatingly poignant. The physical house in Chapter 2 is an empty shell. The life has been entirely drained from the architecture. But the actual life of the family, the soul of the Whitcomb lineage, has been secretly and quietly preserved in the margins of this battered prayer book.
Grace reads the inscriptions aloud. The first one says, in elegant script, Eleanor Whitcomb, Christmas 1938. Underneath that, in a slightly different hand, to Eleanor from Mother.
And as they turn the pages, they find more names, wedding anniversaries, baptisms.
And they are written in different inks. Some are recorded in thick fountain pen. Some are written so lightly in pencil that Tommy has to physically tilt the book toward the window to catch the graphite reflecting in the light just to read the names.
The specific detail, the tilted graphite, it perfectly illustrates the vast gulf between genealogy and true family history.
Unpack that a bit.
Well, genealogy is the collection of data points. It is a sterile spreadsheet of dates. Born in 1910, married in 1932, died in 1985. It is information without texture.
Like digital contacts.
Exactly. But family history is the lived, ink-stained reality. Family history is the frayed ribbon. It is the realization that someone was pressing so lightly with a pencil because perhaps they were writing during a church service or perhaps their hand was shaking.
Wow.
The physical pressure of the pencil on the paper captures the emotional texture of human existence in a way that a digital genealogical record never could.
I am so glad you pointed out the physical pressure of the pencil,
Yeah.
because that is exactly the kind of tactile reality that modern data clouds erase completely.
They flatten it.
Right. But the names aren't the only thing in the book. Tucked inside, just past that frayed ribbon, is a folded piece of paper. It is wedged deeply into the binding. You can just see the edge of it, and there's a single word written on the outside. But it's tucked too deep to decipher.
And this creates the ultimate tension of the chapter.
Oh, it really does. Tommy, operating on pure 10-year-old boy instinct, wants to pull the paper out and unfold it immediately. And I have to be completely honest with you, the listener, and with myself. I would want to open it too.
I mean, who wouldn't?
The urge is overwhelming. It could be a clue. It could be a map, a lost address, a secret confession. Tommy justifies his curiosity by saying, if we read it, we might know who to call.
He frames his snooping as an act of altruism.
Exactly. He thinks he's helping. And I have to ask, is curiosity always a virtue? Because my modern instinct is shouting, open the paper.
And your instinct is the defining instinct of the information age. We operate under the foundational assumption that information wants to be free.
Right. If there's a secret, we have a right to it.
Exactly. If there is a locked door or a hidden paper, we believe we possess an inherent right to access it. And as you pointed out, we constantly justify our voyeurism by claiming we are trying to help or that it is in the public interest.
We see it on the internet every day.
Every single day. But Claire, acting as the moral anchor in this scene, stops his hand.
She brings the hammer down, but she does it gently. She doesn't yell. She simply states moral boundary. We don't yet know that it was left there for us.
Which forces us to dive deeply into the complexity of Claire's character. Earlier, we critiqued her for her rigid pragmatism regarding the lemonade and the library categories.
We were pretty hard on her.
We were, but here, that exact same rigidity becomes a profound virtue. She possesses a sacred, unyielding respect for the privacy of the past.
Tommy tries to argue the legalistic point, though. He says the box was donated, therefore they own it.
But Claire draws a sharp ethical distinction between a family intentionally donating a specific book for public consumption and a faceless property management company blindly clearing out an estate to prep a house for demolition.
She understands that this book wasn't given. It was abandoned through circumstance. And Mrs. Bell immediately backs Claire up. She tells the children about all the intensely private things she has found hidden in donated books over the years.
Marriage certificates.
Bank envelopes filled with cash. Letters of apology never sent.
It's heartbreaking, really.
It is. And when Tommy asks what she does when she absolutely cannot find the original owner, Mrs. Bell delivers one of the most beautiful and haunting philosophies I've ever heard. She says, sometimes we keep a thing for a while. Sometimes we decide it was truly meant to be left behind. You try not to be careless.
You try not to be careless. That is a masterclass in the traditional and specifically Catholic understanding of the communion of saints and the respect owed to the dead.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the dead are not just characters in a historical play meant for our entertainment. They still possess rights. They have a right to their privacy. They have a right to take certain secrets to the grave. To force open their private letters simply to satisfy our own fleeting curiosity is an act of profound arrogance.
I want to tie this directly into Chesterton's political philosophy, specifically his concept of the democracy of the dead. Can you unpack how Claire's action here is actually a political act in the Chestertonian sense?
It is entirely a political act. Chesterton famously wrote in Orthodoxy that tradition is the extension of the franchise. He said, "Tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Tradition refuses to submit to the small and arrogant oligarchy of those who merely happen to be walking about.
Those who merely happen to be walking about. That is such a sharp critique.
Because modern society operates as an oligarchy of the living. We assume that because we are alive and have smartphones, we are smarter and more enlightened than our ancestors, and therefore we can discard their rules, bulldoze their houses, and read their private mail.
But Claire rejects that.
Completely. By refusing to immediately unfold that private paper, Claire is actively giving the Whitcomb ancestors a vote in how their own memories are handled. She is treating them as human beings who deserve dignity, rather than treating them as a puzzle to be solved for a 10-year-old's afternoon entertainment.
So instead of violating that privacy, they take a different route. They perform a quiet act of preservation. Claire takes out her notebook and carefully copies down only the names and dates they can see without intruding into the folded paper. She transcribes the visible data.
It's a very respectful compromise.
Then, Mrs. Bell takes the battered prayer book, places it into a heavy paper envelope, writes, "Hold, do not sell," across the front in thick marker, and physically locks it inside a cabinet behind the librarian's desk.
Safe from prying eyes.
Exactly. She places it next to a baptismal certificate and a handwritten recipe for cough syrup that were also orphaned. Young Nora, displaying that childhood animism again, is worried the book will be lonely in the dark cabinet.
Of course she is.
But Grace, the teenager who felt empathy for the embarrassed book, reassures her by saying, "Books are patient."
What a line. And the drive back to the Brennan house provides one of the most philosophically dense exchanges in the novel so far.
Oh, absolutely.
The adrenaline of the discovery is fading. Tommy, still processing the restraint they just exercised, asks Claire from the back seat if they saved the book.
He wants that hero moment.
He does. But Claire doesn't offer him a grand heroic affirmation. She simply says, "For today," because they still don't know where the book ultimately belongs or who the surviving family members are. She summarizes their action by saying, "We did the next thing that needed doing."
And Tommy's reaction to that phrase is so telling. He replies, "That sounds smaller."
Yeah.
I really want to stop and unpack the psychology of that reaction, because Tommy is speaking for the entire modern world in that moment. Our culture craves grand, heroic, cinematic solutions.
We want the montage sequence.
Yes, we want the systemic overhaul. We want the sweeping legislation. In a movie, Tommy would have opened the letter, found a map, ridden his bike across town, discovered a long-lost heir, saved the Whitcomb house from the bulldozers, and the whole town would have cheered.
Roll credit.
Exactly. That is the narrative we are addicted to. But Claire is teaching him a painful, necessary truth. Civilization is not preserved by grand, sweeping heroics. It is preserved through incredibly small, faithful, often boring acts of restraint.
Doing the next right thing sounds smaller to Tommy because it is smaller.
It lacks applause.
But it is the only thing that is real. It is the only mechanism by which true moral progress is ever sustained. Grand utopian solutions almost always end up riding roughshod over individual human dignity because they prioritize the sweeping vision over the messy reality of the person in front of them.
They break some eggs to make the omelet.
Right, but small acts of restraint, like refusing to read a dead woman's private letter or quietly locking an orphaned book in a cabinet, those build the foundational trust required for a society to function. Claire is building a moral framework for her nephew, brick by boring brick.
So they drive back down Division Street. The crushing summer heat is still radiating off the pavement. As they pass the Whitcomb yard, those neon orange survey flags are still fluttering in the dead grass.
The threat is still there.
The physical house still looks empty and doomed. But the emotional reality has shifted because, as Grace noted, books are patient. The soul of the family is safe in a locked cabinet. They pull up to the Brennan house, the physical home we spent so much time exploring in Chapter 2.
And the pacing of the narrative slows down again here, mirroring the transition from the heat of the day to the cool of the evening. We have their arrival back at Division Street. Patrick, the grandfather, is sitting quietly on the porch with his newspaper.
The patriarch of the family.
Nora runs up the steps to inform him that they found a book that belongs to names. As they all transition into the house, moving toward the kitchen, the narrative explicitly notes that the very gate Patrick and Tommy repaired yesterday, clicks shut quietly behind them.
It is functioning perfectly,
protecting the boundary of the home.
And as they enter the kitchen, what is the very first thing Margaret does? Before anyone really starts explaining the complex details of the library, she goes to the stove and puts the kettle on.
Again, Claire is baffled.
Claire, still operating on her spreadsheet logic, points out that it has been over 90 degrees all day and no one needs hot tea. But Margaret overrides her, stating simply, "We'll think better with tea."
I want to draw attention to the sensory environment and the recurring motifs the author is weaving into this evening sequence. We hear the distant train whistle echoing up from the river valley again, reminding us of the passage of time and the connection to the wider world. We have the physical warmth of the kitchen. The kitchen table is established not just as a place for caloric intake, but as the literal heart of the community's memory processing. The home is depicted as a place of active formation.
Patrick sits at the table and listens to the entire story without interrupting. He lets the kids explain the box, the prayer book, and the folded paper. And when Claire mentions that they did not unfold the paper to read the secret word, Tommy admits out loud that he desperately wanted to.
He confesses his temptation.
He does. And he assumes that his grandfather, the stoic patriarch of the family, would have possessed a sort of automatic, unshakable virtue. Tommy assumes Patrick would have known instantly not to open it. But Patrick surprises him.
It's a great twist.
Patrick leans back and says, "So would I." Tommy is visibly shocked. He says, "I thought you'd know not to." And Patrick delivers what might be the most profound line in the chapter. Knowing isn't always the difficult part.
That is the hard-won wisdom of an 80-year-old man right there. Knowing the right moral choice is often incredibly simple. The ethical rules are usually quite clear, but having the actual discipline to execute that choice, to resist the burning temptation to snoop, to gossip, to take the easy, gratifying way out, that is the difficult part.
It's a daily struggle.
It is a moment of profound psychological solidarity between the elderly man and the young boy. Patrick doesn't lecture Tommy about virtue. He validates the intense reality of the temptation, which ultimately makes the choice to resist it all the more noble.
So, having resisted the temptation of the hidden paper, how do they attempt to solve the mystery of the Whitcomb names? They don't turn to the internet. They don't hire a private investigator. Margaret quietly leaves the kitchen, goes upstairs, and brings down her thick, worn, blue address book.
Let's examine this address book closely because the narrator's description of it is highly specific. The text notes that the book is arranged geographically, chronologically, and spiritually.
Which is just such a brilliant, funny line. Claire, trying to decipher a note in the margins, asks her mother, which Evelyn, a specific phone number, refers to, and Margaret just waves her hand and says it was perfectly obvious when she wrote it down 10 years ago.
Mothers and their filing systems.
Right. Patrick chuckles and notes that "I know where everything is" has always been Margaret's strongest and most terrifying argument.
But look past the humor at the actual function of this object. This blue address book is a physical, spatial map of an entire community. It is a historical heirloom whose value completely transcends money. The pages are filled with addresses that have been crossed out once, twice, 3 times as families married, moved across town, or passed away.
It has loose grocery receipts and funeral cards pressed between the pages.
Exactly. It is the living, breathing memory of Atchison, Kansas, contained in a binder.
I really want to build a bridge here for the listener to truly grasp the cognitive difference between Margaret's book and our modern tools, because it's monumental. Think about this address book versus your smartphone contacts list.
Okay, yeah.
When you get a new phone, or when a phone dies, your contacts are just silently ported over from a server in California. The digital list is perfectly sterile.
Yeah.
It is alphabetically flawless. There's absolutely no history in a digital contact card.
None. It's completely flat.
But Margaret's book is a physical landscape. From a neurological standpoint, the human hippocampus maps spatial memory. When Margaret looks for a name, she remembers that it is in the bottom left corner of a page that is stained with coffee.
Right.
The cognitive friction required to take a pen, draw a heavy line through the name of a friend who has died, and write their widow's new address in the margin. That physical act of crossing out is a tactile act of mourning.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is a physical acknowledgement of change. You can visually track the passage of decades in the different colors of ink, the fading of the pencil marks, the varying pressure of the handwriting. You cannot mourn a digital contact. You just hit delete, and the pixels rearrange themselves to hide the empty space.
That analogy perfectly encapsulates the overarching theme of this entire broadcast. Look at the stark contrast being drawn between the Whitcomb family and the Brennan family. The Whitcomb family's physical inheritance, their lumber, their property lines, their books, and their sacred prayer book is being aggressively auctioned off, boxed up, and outsourced to a property management company.
Strangers who don't care.
Exactly. Their memory is in imminent danger of being permanently erased from the earth. But the Brennans represent a completely different economy. Their true wealth isn't found in a diversified stock portfolio. Their wealth consists of memory, fidelity, and interpersonal connection.
They are actively utilizing their own family's history to rescue and preserve the history of their neighbors.
And they do find a clue, don't they?
They do. Deep in the margins of the Blue Book, Margaret finds a scribbled note next to a crossed-out name that simply says, Daughter St. Joseph, with question mark.
A tiny breadcrumb.
It isn't a guaranteed solution. It is just a fragmented possibility. But it is a place to start. And what I love most is how they react to finding the clue. They don't rush to the telephone to start dialing numbers in the dark.
They don't demand instant gratification.
They just let the clue rest on the table.
Patrick looks at the clock and says, tomorrow seems an appropriate place for tomorrow's work. They allow the mystery to breathe. They possess the psychological security to leave a question unanswered for a night.
That's a rare trait these days.
And as the evening finally settles over the house, Patrick walks into the front room and turns on the old, tube-powered radio.
The sensory description of the radio warming up is just magnificent. We get the low hum, the crackle of static that always precedes the broadcast. The narrator says, it always seemed as though the radio were remembering how to speak.
Such evocative language.
Then, faintly, a distant orchestra begins to play, and an announcer reads the evening weather report. Nobody in the room is actually listening to the forecast. The information isn't the point.
The point is the presence.
Yes, the steady cadence of the voice is a comfort.
The chapter concludes with this profound, enveloping sense of peace. Outside in the dark, the newly repaired gate clicks shut in the evening breeze, standing guard. Back at the library, the Whitcomb prayer book is locked safely in the dark cabinet. They don't know the ultimate resolution of the mystery.
They don't know where the book truly belongs.
But, as the text explicitly states, they know where it is. It is safe. And in a modern world that is constantly rushing, constantly tearing down old houses, constantly surveying property lines and selling off the artifacts of the past for scrap, keeping something safe for just one night is a massive victory.
It is a victory of endurance. As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener, navigating your own life. Why do stories like the Brennans matter today? Why spend an hour dissecting the repair of a wooden gate and the sorting of a dusty library box?
That's a fair question.
Here's my final provocative thought for you to carry into your week. Look around the physical room you are sitting in right now. Look at your shelves, your desk, your bedside table. What hidden papers, what underlined books, what deeply worn physical objects are quietly resting there, waiting to tell your specific story to a complete stranger 50 years from now? When someone eventually opens your favorite book long after you are gone, what accidental artifacts will they find tucked inside? A receipt? A letter? Will they find a sterile digital device they can't unlock? Or will they find the physical indentations of your handwriting?
It's a sobering thought.
It forces a terrifying and beautiful question. Are we living lives of such fidelity and care that we are worthy of being discovered in the margins of a book? When the future stumbles across the artifacts of our daily routines, will they look at the evidence of our lives and say, we need to save this?
It is an incredibly humbling metric for how we live. It strips away our resumes and forces us to ask whether we are merely building a superficial view for the world to see or cultivating a true home that can endure the passage of time.
That is the work of a lifetime. I invite all of you to continue reading along with us in this remarkable chronicle. There is so much more architecture, both physical and spiritual, to uncover. We eagerly want you to return for our next broadcast as we dive into Book 1, Chapter 4, where the unfolding mystery of the Whitcomb house, the encroaching orange flags, and the quiet fidelity of the Brennan family continues to reveal itself. Until next time, keep reading good books, cherish the stories handed down to you, and remember that the most extraordinary adventures often begin in the most ordinary homes. This is Chesterton Radio, the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, where the open door is always on.